Welcome into the Illini Inquirer podcast. It is Jeremy Werner, Joey Wagner live at Memorial Stadium, where for the first time this year, we saw Illinois lose a football game at home. They fall to the red-hot Minnesota Golden Gophers, who have now won 4 straight, and for the first time beat Brett Bielema as Illinois falls 25-17. An ugly game for Illinois, Joey Wagner. It was a beautiful day, beautiful fall day, but the home cooking was spoiled a little bit by these Gophers. We're playing good ball, complimentary ball, and they don't beat themselves. And Illinois finally loses a close game, right? Like the Penn State game, I know the score ended up being 21-7, but that really didn't feel all that close, even though Illinois had a chance to tie it up with 5 minutes left. But we talked about it earlier in the week. I had a feeling Illinois was due one of these. It feels like they're kind of trending towards what their record should be because they won some close games. They deserve credit for that, Joey. But Minnesota has played clean. They played clean for the most part today, while Illinois made some mistakes that we've seen in recent weeks, whether it's fumbles by Luke Altmaier or the defense not being able to get off the field on third down. It results in what is the toughest loss, I believe, for Illinois so far this year.
Yeah, they just couldn't get it going at any point. And the thing is the defense, which we had a ton of questions, and there's still elements of questions, but particularly on third down and as these injuries pile up, the defense kept this in a position for Illinois' offense to figure something out. And Luke Altmaier just didn't look for another week, 2 weeks in a row, Jeremy. He just didn't look like we had seen him look through the first 6 games of the year. And it's really clear to me, and you and I talked about this, and I believe you're writing about this. Luke Altmaier plays well, elevates Illinois to a level that you win these close toss-up games, these games in the margin. And I don't think it's fair to say this game's they're lost only because of Luke Altmaier, but he's got the ability to play well enough to mask a mistake here or there, to kind of overcome a couple, 2-3 drives that don't get off the ground. And that didn't happen today. And the offense was really, really, really underwhelming. And I don't know that we've been able to say, obviously you could say that about Oregon, but I don't remember seeing it like this. It just felt like every yard was a struggle. That drive they completed 3 15-plus yards pass felt like you were watching an air raid offense compared to what it had been for the better part of the game. So it's a tough one to stomach, man, because even through all of that, they had the ball and a chance to go down and try to tie this up with a touchdown and 2-point conversion. A 3-man pressure off the edge, off the right tackle, Melvin Priestley, forced fumble, sack or strip sack. Yeah, that's just kind of indicative of how everything went today.
Yeah, like it's weird to focus on Luke Altmaier as like an issue today, but you said it there, Joey. Like, what was the reason for their 5-1 start, 6-1 start? It's because Luke Altmaier was the competitive advantage. He kind of like helped Illinois overcome all of its other like little issues that it had. And the defense had a bad game against Purdue. Well, Luke Altmaier kind of bailed you out. Luke Altmaier, plays well at the end of Nebraska, plays well at the end of Kansas to go win those games late. And even against Michigan, I didn't think he looked great and crisp as a passer, but his legs were the difference. And that outplayed Jack Tuttle, which is not that hard, but it outplayed Jack Tuttle, and your defense played well against that terrible Michigan offense to where you're able to win the game. The last 2 weeks, Luke Altmaier has not played all that well. And this game today, he ends up with 226 yards and a touchdown and has a couple key runs late in that game, but 2 fumbles. Like, fumbling and ball security has been a problem for Luke Altmaier the last 2 years. It's been his one flaw, really, that we could pick at this year. He's got 6 fumbles over the last 6 games, Joey, and 2 that could have been called fumbles. Like, we're really close. The end of the Purdue game, Oregon, he had another fumble that they ruled him down. Like, it's becoming a problem, and I get it. The pressure is part of the problem, too. The offensive line has been worse than the coaching staff built them up to be in the offseason. But whenever Luke seems to get hit, he doesn't feel it. He doesn't seem to see it at the end of the game. That's what he said. Like, he just didn't feel or see that pressure at the end of the game, and that closes it. That closes the book on that game. And the first one, I know he got tilted upside down, but he's got to take care of himself too. Like, so those fumble issues, those ball security issues, continue to be a problem for a quarterback that doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. He fumbles it a lot, and they need him to be great for Illinois to win Big Ten football games. And the last 2 games, he hasn't been great. I could argue Michigan, he wasn't great as a thrower. So it's a lot of pressure on Luke Altmaier. But that is what led Illinois to success early in the season, was him being great. And now when your quarterback's not great, kind of exposes some of the other issues on the team.
Yeah, it does. And we said it last week. The fumbles we knew were going to bite Illinois at some point. We said it a week ago that this Oregon game was out of hand, but these are going to turn up, and today it did. But yeah, something just hasn't looked right with him the last 2 weeks. And I asked him about it. He didn't really seem to subscribe, I guess, to that idea, or certainly wasn't going to say it, in front of a bunch of cameras. But those plays, just the crisp command of the offense, right? Like the ability to really feel like in the first 6 weeks we didn't see him make a head scratching RPO decision. Like everything was perfect for him, and now you're like, oh, maybe you should have. Should have handed it off there. Should have kept it there. And some of the passes haven't really been on point. I can't pinpoint, Jeremy, what it is, but it's not connecting. And you're right. Like this roster is better, and probably not than 2022. That's not fair given all
No.
the draft picks. It's not better than that, but it's for Illinois football. It's better than a lot of rosters you've seen over the last 10, 12 years. But it still has its flaws and depth, and we'll get into that here really shortly, Jeremy. It's a problem there. So you need your quarterback, your guy who's the guy to come in and elevate you. And when that doesn't happen, you see just how thin everything gets.
Yeah, and with Luke, it's maybe a week off helps. But the other thing he brought up that Pat Bryant brought up, like Luke talked to us earlier this week, and we rarely get him midweek about how he and Barry Lunny and Brett Bielema brought this up too. Like they had feedback, like Altmaier had feedback about what he likes with the offense. And after this game, he talked about how they love when they go up tempo. You saw a different Luke Altmaier late in the game, and they're trailing, and he's got to make these throws. They're going up tempo. They're not going huddle. He seems to be more comfortable in that. Pat Bryant also said that we are more comfortable as an offense. We're going up tempo. We're going no huddle. And when they were huddling today, I mean, at one point they had 7 straight incompletions. The defense can make checks. They can rotate their personnel to kind of mix with Illinois.
It also burned a timeout. If we pieced everything together, Luke's headset went out, and they were all huddled, so there were no signals coming in, and they had to burn a timeout. I mean, that's a freak incident, but I think you're – sorry, go ahead to your point, but that's kind of factored in there.
Yeah, and I know you want to hold the ball for a little bit. Minnesota won time of possession by 10 minutes today, but you also want to move the ball. And they didn't move the ball well at all in the middle part of this game. So I found that interesting that Luke was sharing that Pat was sharing that, and it's something Barry Lunny's going to have to consider. I think Barry Lunny's had a great year, but that third quarter, you had opportunities to go take this lead, and eventually Illinois did in the fourth quarter, but like you had opportunities to take this game, and they just didn't. And what Barry's been I've been really impressed with Barry is his quarterback development. And his quarterback seems to be saying, even a little bit through us, about like what he's more comfortable doing. I think you got to lean into that because you need him to play well for your team to have a chance in the last 3 games. Because we've seen, especially today, that when he doesn't, then when he's a little off, that this team certainly has flaws that can be exposed by Michigan State, which is winning, is in competition with Indiana right now. Northwestern beats Purdue today in overtime. Like Rutgers can run the ball, they can control the ball. Like none of these games are gimmies for a team like Illinois if your quarterback's not playing well. And Barry's got to figure that out the next week.
That's right. And that third quarter, let's dive into that really quickly. That felt like an important quarter. Yeah, Illinois comes out, they get Minnesota in a 3-and-out. Now you get a chance to put something together and go downfield. They have 25 yards total in the third quarter. Nothing really was going anything close to right. And frankly, some of those yards came after a face mask penalty on the final drive of the third quarter, extended the drive, and they were able to – actually, they picked up nothing after that, did they?
No,
they didn't. No, they did not. But
those
they
are missed
capitalized on it,
opportunities.
right? Yeah.
Those are missed opportunities that they had. I mean, to have that kind of penalty after it should have been 3-and-out there, and he made nothing of it. Would you have 3 straight incompletions after that or something like that? There was one drive that
batted down the line. He was like that really weird kind of – it wasn't intentional grounding, but he just kind of rolled out and threw it. He had a man in his face. Then whatever my notes say, another incomplete pass. I mean, just didn't go in. 3 straight incompletions after that, when really – for as good as Luke Altmaier's been this year, I kind of longed for a little more Josh McCray at times in this game to pick up, try to just get 3 yards, 4 yards, and make things a little bit more manageable. McCray finished, Jeremy, with
7 carries
attempts for 72 yards. I really would have liked to see more of him in that game. I think he's been running well. He's been running tough, falling forward like Caden Fagan had done last season. 7 doesn't feel like nearly enough for him.
Yeah. The other thing with the offense is this offensive line.
So,
It's been subpar all year. They thought this was going to be a strength of their team. They misread that. This offensive line has to get better. They need to get more out of this group. So, Bart Miller, I'm just wondering what the self evaluation of all of that is, because there's some moments, Joey, where they look pretty good, but just the inconsistency of it. And part of that Luke Altmaier's to wear with protection, but feels like every game we're talking about how we're left wanting more out of this offensive line. I think at the end of the day, it's just it's a below average Big Ten offensive line.
yeah, Brett Bielema said they had to figure out why some of this pressure is coming off the edge. When I asked him about the offensive line, which is jarring because, I mean, it happened today, right? But like the tackles to me hadn't been the big issue coming into this game. But 3-man pressure coming off the edge against Melvin Priestley on that strip sack in the game, that's just, you can't have that. And Brett Bielema said, well, we've really only rotated one position, right guard. Out was Chrysler and with Brandon Henderson. I don't know if that means they're going to try to explore other rotations in there. I don't know where you would try to unlock that at, Jeremy, because Melvin or Kevin Wigginton, maybe is he a guy you'd like to see more of? Hunter Whiteneck, is he a guy you'd like to see more of? But I think at the end of the day, they're not out there. They're not pushing for a reason when this line is not dominating.
All right, defensively, bend but not break, more of the same. But I guess you could give them a takeaway if you credit Colin Dixon for the forced fumble and recovery on a turnover on downs. But at the end of the day, the stat sheet says 0 turnovers. And this team now has just 5 takeaways in 6 Big Ten games. So that early rush of 9 takeaways in 3 games has not been consistent. But kudos to them. They did force a lot of field goals, but a few big explosive plays, I think, exposed a little bit of Illinois' depth issues. Xavier Scott left the game in the second half and did not return. Brett Bielema doesn't think that'll linger past the off week and that he should return. But Dylan Rosiak has a fracture, out for the season, I would imagine, for that. And you had James Krutz play in the first play. I think it was the first play. I think that he came in. Darius Taylor runs off for 29 yards. It was a missed assignment. And, I thought Jaheim Clark came in and gave you some good plays. The pass breakup, he had a tackle for loss, great read early in the game. But, man, that when they needed him most in that fourth quarter, Minnesota really attacked him, and he gave up that huge 37-yard catch to Daniel Jackson. I just felt gave Minnesota right back the momentum. After Illinois had scored and taken the lead, they finally get an explosive pass play. Some of your depth is getting exploited now. Malachi Hood, a third stringer, comes in the game and plays some reps. And I thought he flashed, but defensive injuries are showing up. Seen some of the offensive guys get banged up. Pat Bryant was in a boot after this game. He said he's fine. He did return to the game after kind of getting rolled up on, but this is a team that just can't afford injuries. And boy, Xavier Scott and Dylan Rosiak not being in that game, you could feel that, especially in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, because I thought Xavier Scott had done a really, really good job on Daniel Jackson all day. And you wonder what would have happened if that were him in coverage with just a huge amount of snaps that he has in his career, rather than Jaheim Clark, who fairly, outside of that play, I thought was really encouraging. And he played really more than Torrey Cox, who was available and went out there when Xavier Scott got hurt. I'm assuming Brett Bielema would have told us if we had asked him. We didn't. There were other things to address. That Torrey Cox was probably cleared later in the week. Jaheim Clark at that point had gotten those reps. But the injuries are our concern coming out of Oregon with this team. And you still look at it now without Dylan Rosiak. You're going to have to go to some – we saw Luke Zardzan out there, a walk-on linebacker, playing at times with Ryan Mead. The secondary, Terrence Brooks didn't play. Someone said they don't trust Brett with injuries. He was pretty straightforward for the most part. The only one you could say, I thought he'd play would have been Terrence Brooks. But otherwise, everyone that he said would be out there ultimately ended up being out there today. So that's just November, right, man? Like we talk about depth with this team, and it's improved in a lot of ways. But there are positions that just need more help there, need more experience. I think is probably more the thing than need more talent. I mean, I like Jaheim Clark as a prospect. He just needs more reps over the course of time. Tyson Rooks is intriguing, needs more reps to really kind of be in those moments. So that's a huge storyline moving forward. And no Dylan Rosiak. That's my huge concern with this team is linebacker play wasn't really outstanding with Dylan Rosiak, and now you take a team captain out there and a guy who is sound in what he does. That's a really fascinating storyline going forward. And I don't know what it looks like. Probably more James Cruz. I don't know if it's Luke Zardzin, if it's Malachi Hood, what they do, and they got a bye week to figure it out.
Yeah, I thought Cruz got better as the game went on. He ended up with 9 tackles. Minnesota ran the ball out. Darius Taylor was the best player in the field today, 131 rushing yards, but also 9 catches for 58 yards. This Minnesota offense, like coming in, it didn't terrify me, Joey, because it kind of plays into what Illinois likes to do: bend but don't break. But boy, they take what you give them, and Illinois just was not able to get pressure on the quarterback, not able to get those takeaways. And I thought Minnesota is just able to kind of be efficient. Third down, 7 of 15. Illinois has been bad on third down. I think they're 14th or 15th right now in third down conversion, close to 50%. And Minnesota was efficient on first and second down. They're able to get the ball to their running back in the passing game, and Darius Taylor's a good player. So Brosemer didn't do a lot other than that huge 37-yard catch to Daniel Jackson, but he's efficient, man. He was just able to kind of take what Illinois gave him and able to score enough points. And kudos to their kicker, who missed 6 of his first, I think, 13 field goals this year, makes all 4 of them, and that ended up being a huge part in this game. While Illinois special teams, I thought, really struggled. Hugh Robertson, especially, is the punter today. 3 of his 4 punts were under 35 yards. So you thought that would be an advantage coming into today. But Minnesota, I thought, had the edge there. And I don't know how much the game changes if Ethan Machowski hits that 55-yard field goal with the wind at his back going wide left. I'm not going to criticize the guy for missing a 55-yarder, but if that goes in, I wonder if it changes anything. But I just thought Minnesota had the special teams advantage today.
Yeah, and it's the thing that we talked about for teams that live in the margins, Minnesota being one of those teams. That's the overlooked phase that usually will pop up. It's kind of the way it goes. And you look at 2022 and how that ended for Illinois, there were moments that special teams popped up, and you don't think about it until you think about it. And when you do, it matters in a really big way. And I mean, Hugh Robertson started well, right? He pinned him at the 2-yard line and just didn't really have a lot after that. I don't know that there's a few positives. There's definitely more positives from this team from Oregon, but it's kind of some of this feels like similar stories popping up week after week, and then those holes you see in the way they go about things. We talk about a lot of the same things week over week here.
The other thing we got to mention with depth is Miles Scott will be out for the first half against Michigan State after the targeting call. Brett Bielema was not very happy about that after the game. So I'll play a short clip of Brett Bielema talking about the refs.
I was tired of that. It's kind of a clown show in regards to certain things. I got extremely frustrated last week with a non-targeting call that was called on the field and reversed, and this one gets called in from above. And I just get frustrated that, like, to me, if they're saying he hit him and he targeted him, to lose Miles Scott for the rest of this game and the next one, like, it's just the first half of the next game, that it's just ludicrous. There's no consistency, and if he targeted him, he targeted him, but like that's just really ridiculous.
Yeah, Brett Bielema also was not happy after the game. I mean, the hold call was a bad one on Josh Geske. That was a first down conversion for Colin Dixon on that one. That was a bad call. Felt bad for Josh Geske on that one. But Bielema's just not very happy with the referees, and he's not afraid to say it. Do I think the referees blew the game for Illinois? No. I thought they had plenty of chances to win this one. I just think the hardest part about a targeting call, Joey, is, man, it is so hard as a defender. And to be out for the next half of football, I just hate that part of the rule. I understand why they have the rule, but to be out for the next game because of that just doesn't make any sense to me.
No, here's what it really just hit me. No Miles Scott for the first half. No Dylan Rosiak, who I assume may have been next in line. Who's their in-helmet guy? I would assume it's one of Matt Krasevich or Matthew Bailey. It's a little nugget, right? But it's something that this year with that in there, I don't know that it would have gone to Dylan Rosiak. Regardless, it seems like they like it at that safety position. But I'm wondering, I'll have to ask Aaron Henry about that when we talk to him on Monday. But this that Miles Scott, and obviously what he does on the field, but his communication with the rest of those DBs, like they are going to miss that in that first half.
Yeah. All right. You got anything else you want to hit on before we get to some of these questions here in the chat?
Oh, goodness. No, I thought Zachary Frank, like we were talking early in the game, and you said, if Illinois wins this, who's the star of the game? Zachary Franklin, maybe Josh McCray, one of those two guys. So
I like Altmaier, those 3 passes by Altmaier. I mean, Carson Go, a hell of a catch, right? I mean, contested catch on the sideline there, but it felt like that drive was all Luke, so it felt like it needed to be him. But yeah, Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin are really good, man. Combined for 10 catches, 143 yards.
Yeah, that's why when we were talking about the injuries coming into this, it's like Pat Bryant, his presence helps Zachary Franklin and Zachary vice versa. So the thought of possibly not having him would have been an issue for that. I guess I didn't realize it in the course of the game is you just get zoned in on watching. I'm hung up on the 7 carries for Josh McCray. Like that 42-yarder, when he broke 3 tackles. And in my mind, I wondered, is this what he needed? Like he's slowly been finding that again. Is this the kind of play that vintage McCray play that, could lock him up or get him going a little bit more? He had 3 carries after that. He had the 42-yard touchdown, right, Jeremy? 14 yards on his next carry, which was that end of half carry. 10 yards in the third quarter, and then -2 in the fourth quarter. When you have 3 straight runs, 10 or more yards, I would like to see that going a little bit better. I know the offensive line certainly was not helpful in any meaningful way in the running game today. So maybe that was a limiting factor of that, but I don't know. I just thought that run could have been a moment for McCray.
I agree with you, especially when you're struggling to run with the other 2 running backs, right? But the other part is you never sustain that lead for another drive. Like that next drive, if you had the lead, was a Josh McCray drive, right? Like closer Josh McCray, whittle down that clock, get some first downs, and they've never got to. But still, 7 touches. That just didn't make any sense.
7 touches, right? Because I thought even out of the backfield, he would have been a viable option for Illinois. 7 touches is a good way to put it. It's just not enough.
All right, get those super chats in, get your questions in. We'll get to those. But first, let's hear from one of our great sponsors.
I know you guys have heard me talk about Home Field Apparel a lot, but there's a reason. I have some of these shirts from Home Field Apparel, and they are a premium collegiate apparel brand based in Indianapolis. And what I love about them is they're focused on creating incredibly comfortable, officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs. So go to homefieldapparel.com and check out their Illini gear. The Flying Illini t-shirt, I love. If they have any bomber jackets, go check those out. But you see all of these vintage designs that are great. They kind of stand out in a crowd, but also these are comfortable, well-fitting. They're not the boxy kind of ones you get at the random department store. No, these are well-fitted, comfortable t-shirts and apparel. So go check it out at homefieldapparel.com. Go to the drag down menu, click on Illini, and you'll see all of these great shirts, including Orange Crush, old school Fighting Illini basketball shirts, the Flying Illini t-shirt with the great winged logo, Script Illini gear, including t-shirts, hoodies, an orange ringer tee, the 2004-05 Illinois basketball shirts so you can relive those glory days, but also they have great hoodies, great crew necks, great Illini football gear, including the 80s Illini helmet on there. If you're an old school sweatshirt guy, they got those. If you're a quarter zip guy, they got those. If you want a women's tank there with the Script Illini, they got that. So go to homefieldapparel.com to check out all the great gear they have there. If you're not an Illini fan, they have more than 180 plus growing list of schools. So you can check out all the gear from all over the country. And right now, use code Illini24 for 15% off at homefieldapparel.com. That's Illini24 for 15% off all of the gear at homefieldapparel.com.
All right, let's get to some of these questions. Def with a super chat, $19.99. Thank you, Def. He said, I'm saving up flowers and fruit baskets to Jeff Grimes at Kansas and Sharon Moore, Kirk Campbell at Michigan. Just grateful to have 6 wins. Please just win. I'm at Rutgers. Cheesecake offer still stands. I guess he's going to be at the Rutgers game there, Joey. I think that's kind of what I felt coming into this game, Joey, is I do feel Illinois was a little fortunate to be 6-2. It's just about how well your quarterback had played, how we've won so many close games. It just felt like they were due based on the numbers, based on probabilities, that if they got into a close game against a team that doesn't beat itself like Minnesota, and credits them, they just don't beat themselves, that Illinois could drop one and have a disappointment. And that's proven to be true. Listen, Illinois went and won Kansas. They went and won Nebraska. They went and won Michigan. They shouldn't have to apologize for those. But how many of those wins are holding up is like great wins. I still think Michigan's a good win for this program. Nebraska's a good win for this program. But those aren't world beaters either. So, I just thought their 6-2 record was probably a little bit more inflated than what they actually were.
Yeah, and the metrics kind of prove that out or back that up, I should say, is probably a better way to put that. Look, I mean, that's kind of been the story a little bit of these teams when you're operating with such thin margins, and you can go back to last season to maybe 2022 in some aspects to 2021 and point to games that they lost. Like, man, they're really in a position to win that game, and games that they walked out of there and you recognize the moment, but it's also like, hey, that could have, if Dylan Raiola hits an open tight end in the end zone, we're having a different conversation. Like, you've seen enough of both of those games that
if Jeff Grimes runs the freaking ball.
Oh, goodness gracious. Yeah. Like, so it does kind of get itself in the middle a little bit.
All right, Fedigator, $4.99 super chat. Thank you, Fedigator. 3 clown shows I saw today. 3-man rushes on third down, the O-line, and Lunny's continued uninspired play calling, and Luke looks broken. I don't know if Luke looks broken. He just looks off. I thought today was one of Lunny's most questionable games. I think he's had a good year. I think Barry has had a very good year. I think his quarterback playing well for most of the year has been proof of that. But when his players are saying, hey, we like to go up tempo a little bit more, Josh McCray only gets 7 touches. I have issues with that. The 3-man rushes on third down. I did see more 4-man rushes today. I saw some blitzes. Kenan Odeluga with a sack today, right? Like, that was nice to see. But the O-line is a concern. Yeah, that has been a consistent, like, not as good as this staff thought they would be.
No, and it's interesting because there have been moments where you see it and you think to yourself, like, okay, that's what they were talking about and what they saw. You tell us they saw in training camp and in spring practices, but there's just been far too many moments where nothing looks like it's pairing well together on that line, and things just look really disjointed out there and breakdowns that probably shouldn't happen. So yeah, that's got to be a huge point of the off week, is to try to figure out what the heck's going on there. And I would say you've got to listen to your guys. Brett Bielema talks about that a lot. If your 2 best players offensively are saying, hey, we're better playing tempo, you might want to try to play tempo against Michigan State, and maybe that'll be a philosophical adjustment to try to make in terms of ramping up the pace. But if that's how your guys feel most comfortable and feel best, you've got to, at this point, you've got to answer to that and listen to that.
Adam, it's time for Bart Miller to be held accountable. 1 above average O-line, 2 bad ones, and 1 really bad one. That can't continue. I don't know what that looks like from our perspective, but yeah, this offensive line's been disappointing this year. And last year it was the first 6 games too. Now bounce back, but I think the fact that you've had to change the starting lineup 2 years in a row is not a great sign of your offseason evaluation. And their depth is better this year, but it hasn't led to completely better results. I think they went and got 2 pretty good players in the portal at tackle, but the talent level still got to continue there, and the development's got to get better. This is going to be a really interesting offseason because they got to go get a left tackle most likely, and getting the most out of guys like a Brandon Henderson, Josh Geske, Josh Kreutz, Melvin Priestley for another year. Those guys got to take a leap and just be more consistent.
Yeah, they do. And, for the longest time, when you mentioned left tackle, I think you and I thought, and from what we had heard in early conversations when he got on campus, was we had penciled Brandon Henderson into that position. I don't know if that's the guy. I think they really like him as a guard. If there's next level for him, that's probably where he projects to be more as a guard. I think you could probably say the same about Melvin Priestley. So, if there's an opportunity to go get a couple tackles again and just see where your best 5 fit, and then you certainly got to maximize that. And then you've got to ask yourself, is there anyone younger who's going, like, at some point you need those, you can't just keep being in there. So at some point, this development chamber of offensive linemen, which isn't unique to Illinois, unless you're getting the top 24 kids in the class, I mean, those offensive linemen take time. So who's going to be that first of this next younger wave to join Brandon Henderson? I think that's a really fair question, and one that I don't know that I have the immediate answer to. Maybe you do.
No, I don't. I mean, I think Brandon Henderson's the guy that you think has a huge ceiling, and he's got to take a leap this offseason. I think he's going to grow a lot, right? Like that's a guy who could probably improve as much as anybody on that front. Kreutz, I think, has been solid.
I think TJ McMillan's the next guy, but Josh Kreutz is there.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you had to look at who's ready, he would be my answer, but you've got a center you really believe in up there.
Yeah, and I just don't think Zafir Stewart and Brandon Hansen are going to be ready next year. I wonder if a guy like Eddie Turk could eventually move to the offensive line, but that's probably a year or two away. So, they're going to development of the guys they have now. I mean, they should return 4 starters on the offensive line. So that growth is going to be massive for them. And then you got to find somebody in the portal to replace JC Davis. Def, again, $4.99 super chat. Thanks, Def. I'm a huge fan of Luke and hate to say it, but a $20 super chat for each of you says Luke won't be a pain point for Illini fans next year. It's a pain point.
Are you projecting he's leaving? Is that what I'm reading? Like you think he won't be a pain because he's not? I thought
he's not a pain point. He's not even a pain point for this program. He's great for this program. It's just today was proof that Luke Altmaier was your competitive advantage. He was the X factor that lifted you to that great start. And when he's not at the top tier of his game, then this Illinois team is in trouble.
Yeah, when your quarterback plays as well as we've seen him play over time, especially this season, when that play isn't met, then it really sticks out. I mean, he's been good enough that he's sitting here and he was 20 of 33 passing with 226 yards and a touchdown. If you would just walk by that at any point prior to Luke Altmaier, you would be like, hey, I mean, okay, that couldn't have been the reason, but he's shown that he can be that competitive advantage, Jeremy, as you mentioned. So, like, pain point, I don't – maybe there will be some clarity. I would doubt that, but I don't find him to be a pain point. I think you're pretty good standing to have Luke Altmaier as your quarterback at Illinois.
Yeah, listen, Luke could hit the open market if that's what you're saying, and make a lot of money. He can make a lot of money here, and I do think he's comfortable here, and his role. And he just said today afterwards, I asked him about like the pressure of having to lift a team and be that reason they win games. He said, I love it, like that's what I want. But he's dealing with adversity right now. He learned how to deal with adversity last year. Now he's kind of hit that adversity this season. So I'm just interested to see how he responds.
I thought today was sorry, Jeremy. I thought today was that first look at, okay, you had adversity at Oregon. You didn't play very well. You threw the interceptions. Yeah, they're as talented as anyone in America. But I thought today was really the first look we'd see at that new Luke bounce back that we'd kind of gotten the sense that he's built himself to be able to do, and that didn't really happen in the way that we thought it would. So Michigan State, like, how do you bounce back now from 2 of them, and how do you stop that from 3? I think that's where you see that year-over-year growth that he's really passionately talked about how important that's been for him. So, like, yeah, all eyes are going to be on him in 2 weeks against Michigan State.
Jason, Aiden Childs will eat this Illinois defense alive. Aiden Childs is one of the most talented quarterbacks in the Big Ten. He's also one of the youngest quarterbacks in the Big Ten. And he's thrown 2 interceptions already today against Indiana in the first half. He's now thrown 11 interceptions this season. So great athlete, good arm. I think he's going to be really good for Jonathan Smith, but he is still going through a lot of growing pains. I like that matchup better than a guy who's going to nickel and dime you like Brosmer and just not make mistakes. For this defense, they need takeaways. Now, my question, Joey, is going against Michigan State. How do you get those when you don't have Dylan Rosiak? You don't have Miles Scott for the first half, right? Xavier Scott's been banged up, right? I think he should be back, but you're relying on some guys like Matt Krasetich, Jaheim Clark, but you also need those pass rushers to force some of this. And the pressure was just non-existent for huge chunks of this game. They got to generate more pressure. And I still think this defense can get more aggressive at times, Joe. I just think you got to force these quarterbacks off their game and just not let them sit in the pocket. Too many third downs are going by where these quarterbacks are way too comfortable.
Yeah, I thought there were moments today where there was good pressure that obviously, as you saw, I don't think when he was pressured, I'll have to look at what PFF says for what he was under pressure, but you could tell a difference in Max Brosmer when Gabe Akis was bearing down on him, when Seth Coleman was bearing down on him. Kanano DeLuga gets the sack. I don't feel like there was the egregious what in the world are your 2 outside backers doing in coverage play that we saw at Oregon, but there were times they dropped back, and I know Aaron Henry told us on Monday that look has been advantageous for them at times this year, but I still think, to me, it's really hard to imagine a scenario where your most advantageous position for Gabe Akis isn't having him rush the quarterback. I understand changing pictures, change them in a different way. Get him bearing down on that quarterback every single chance you get.
TCR Brad, what's up, Brad? $5 super chat. Long-time listener, first-time caller. Not the first-time caller. 21 second downs today for Illinois. Average distance, 8.2 yards. Half were 10 yards or more. Tough to create rhythm. Yeah, like their offense, Khalil Valentine, Aiden Lawfrey combined for 10 carries for 31 yards. Again, I just don't know how Josh McCray only has 7 carries in this game. Luke Altmaier in the run game just did not produce a lot for you either. And first down passes, like staying ahead of the sticks is needed. And it's not a great running team. I feel like they've been successful at times, and that's why I would have, as you've said, Joey, I would have ridden Josh McCray a lot more because you just feel like positive yards are most likely going to happen with him.
Yeah, and again, like the offensive line did not help, especially in the second half. It felt like what would they rush for, Jeremy, in the second half here? Bad. I should have had this prepared.
42 yards on 13 carries.
So I understand that.
They're also 8 for 18 passing, 7 straight incompletions.
Yeah, not a ton. I suppose really worked for Illinois in the second half, but I just it feels like that running game has slowly been unlocking a little bit. So to completely pivot away from that, I don't understand. We won't talk to Barry Lunny on Monday because the open week, so that'll be in 2 weeks question, or 10 days, I guess, question for Barry.
The good news is you do have an open week, Joey, to get a little healthy. It's not going to help for a guy like Dylan Rosiak, but you hope it helps for Xavier Scott, for Pat Bryant, who got banged up a little bit today, and just maybe even Luke Altmaier, because maybe he's been hitting some, he's taking some hits back there, man. So hopefully they can get healthy going into this final 3-game stretch where I still think Illinois should be favored in all of these games, but they got some things to clean up. And Brett Bielema said, they only have so many evaluation days left that the staff can actually be on the road recruiting. So while it's going to be a big weekend for them of official visits next week, they're going to stay here, evaluate, make some corrections, hopefully not overcorrect like Aaron Henry did the first time with that Purdue game. But it's a big game, 3-game stretch, Joey, that kind of determines how you feel about this season. You end with 8 or 9 wins, you feel pretty good. If you limp to the stretch and maybe only find one more win here, feel a lot differently about the season. And like that it's kind of been the story of the Brett Bielema era. As good as it has been comparatively, you've just missed out on some better opportunities with the way you finished these seasons. So big month ahead for Illinois.
Yeah, big month ahead. And that's, when you zoom out and I see people, it's kind of an internal battle you see, whether it's people who've covered Illinois for as long as you have, and for a couple of years like I have, or you see fans who have watched this forever, and you say, well, how in the world is a 7-win and 8-win season of disappointments? Because expectations change when you start 6-2, when you start 7-1, and you see a path, and then you see the way the schedule lines up. It's not like in any of those years they started 6-2 or 7-1, and you were looking down the chamber at Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, when it was really, really humming along. Like there's been really winnable games, and games that this program should win. Hey, I don't want to overlook. I know Def's put another super chat in there. He's been really good about always jumping in here. I don't want to overlook. Yeah, he said, been calling for Geske subbing since last September when Wigginton to start, when he first said ILL. Wonder how much of the interior is based on merit. Here's what we know, what we've been told from Bart Miller about Kevin Wigginton. What we see in a game, this is a really interesting storyline for me, because he says when he's in a game, you see it. He plays at a pretty good level, but it doesn't sound like he's consistent at practice. At some point, do you have to just say, man, well, he's doing it in a game, like there's merit to put him out there? And like that is, every coach
doesn't practice well, plays well, or the guy who practices well but doesn't play as well. Yeah,
I don't want to pretend like this is an easy, like, of course, like I get, if every coach would probably tell you that there's some sort of kind of internal battle you're pulling back and forth there. But if you feel like he can go out in a game and maybe he looks like, not as good in practice, if he can go out in a game and perform, you got to give it a whirl a little bit more than we've seen it since was it the Purdue game, if I'm not mistaken?
Yeah, the thing about him, he played Penn State too and had a good drive that got all the way to the goal line before the bad snap. Yeah. Kevin Wigginton, he's not the strongest guy. So run blocking, I don't think he's your guy. And that's why they like Chrysler and Brandon Henderson. Those guys are powerful. But when it comes to just reliability and pass protection, he's pretty good. And he was pretty good at that at Michigan State. So it's probably more just what they want. And, yeah, I can understand if you feel like guys are practicing better, they've earned that spot. But for a group that has struggled, that might be an answer. That might be something you try a little bit more. I've just been surprised that he hasn't gotten a few more reps. Like that he hasn't gotten some of these, like, hey, give him a series each half and see what he can do.
Yeah, because he started games in the Big Ten. You've seen him out there. I'm not trying to, like, I understand. Like, when you're a coach, like, it's such a weird, precedent is the right word or whatever to put a guy who, when you talk so much about, hey, if you show it in practice, it'll reward in games, and a guy who doesn't, by what we hear, we don't see practice. So it's not like we can sit here and say, yeah, he's not been good. This is just Bart Miller on the record has said that. So that's all we really to base off of. But that's a heck of a dynamic. If you're, you're Illinois, if you're a fan, you're maybe hoping that this week is his Brandon Henderson last bye week, where he comes out and really, really shows. I don't know that Geski's been, altogether someone that you have to replace, but I think if you can get a rotation and get Wigginton in there to get a chance to show what he can do, would be interesting. One comment.
Let me get to this one first, Jason.
Yeah,
I just want to make sure you've heard this.
Yep.
You said, what was the deal with the boot on Pat Bryant after the game, preventative? Pat said, Pat went back in the game and finished the game. So, he got rolled up on, and probably an ankle injury or knee injury or something like that. Probably an ankle, with the boot on. So they decided to put that boot on, so just to alleviate the pressure, alleviate the weight on him. So sounds preventative. He finished the game. I would imagine in 2 weeks he will be fine.
Yeah, finish the game, talk to media is typically a sign of doing okay. Someone suggested Tanner Heckel or Mac Versetich running the ball. Maybe just Josh McCray would be an option. This isn't Madden. Okay, I know those guys were good in high school at doing it all, but it is 9 games into the season. This is not a time to say, well, look, like Tanner Heckel, freshman, you're trying to get special teams, you're trying to get defense. What do you think about running this thing here? Huh? Like it's just not reality. Okay.
All right. So to wrap this up, I just thought Illinois was due one of these. Just like Nebraska lost to Illinois, and that was really disappointing. I felt Illinois was due for a close loss based on the way it had been playing, and based on its quarterback had not played at the highest level the last couple of weeks, and his defense just wasn't making game-changing plays, and the offensive line has been a concern. So that's how I feel about that one. You're still 6-3 going to the final 3 games, which anyone would have taken going into the year. But I just feel like this 3-game stretch, I know Brett Beal wants to focus on the 1-0, but this 3-game stretch is going to determine how you feel about the season. If you win 2 or 3, you feel good, you feel solid. You can win the final 3, and which you should be favored in these. Feel great. With a 9-win season. These don't happen very often. You got to clean some things up, Joey, and it gets harder when you got all these injuries.
Yeah, like the way these 3 games go, it's kind of how this season is going to be remembered. I think at this point, a winning season is obviously on the table, depending on the outcome of a bowl game. And you look and you can see progress, but you hit that 9-win threshold. You go into a bowl game at 9 wins, and suddenly there's might be more buzz. And you win 3 in a row to close out, and you go play whatever, I'm assuming SEC team and whatever bowl you're gonna be at. You can beat the drums of progress and like really, really hammer that home and have some backup to do this. So yeah, they're going to say 1-0, but you can still really, really etch this as a heck of a good season with these final 3.
Fedigator said, I don't think we'll be favored against Michigan State. They're down 23-10 to Indiana right now. They're 4-4. They'll be 2-4 in the Big Ten after this one. Listen, I get it's a bigger brand. They got some talent there. I'm not saying Illinois should be a 10-point favorite, but I think they should be favored at home.
Should be favored, yeah. And you assume they'd be healthier and in some capacity. We'll see what that looks like, but yeah, they should be favored.
All right, it was a big recruiting weekend for Illinois, and I would expect there to be some news out of this weekend with a couple official visitors, a big 2026 visitor as well. We'll have the updates on that. I'll have takeaways or column after this one, and Joey will have plenty from the locker room after this loss, and then we'll dive into basketball season here, Joey, because we got 2 basketball games to start during the off week. So we'll have you covered at Illini Inquirer. Thank you for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Give us a follow, a rating, a review. And if you're watching here on YouTube, hit that like button on the way out, subscribe, and hit that notifications bell as well. We appreciate all you guys, especially those super chats and everybody that's watching live on the YouTube channel. So everybody have a great night. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer podcast.